Inchai Comic Guy here with another Comicsgate unboxing, and today we're going to be talking about Psycho 66. And it's not about being crazy, it's about being Japanese. This is a kaiju monster comic book set in the year 1966, which actually really does fit for the genre and for what was going on in Japan at the time. My copy of Psycho 66 did not come through the mail. This is a digital copy that I actually received from people involved in the actual comic book, and I just want to thank them for giving me an opportunity to read your book. Even though this is a digital copy and not a paper copy, we're still going to judge it by the same standard. Obviously, packaging doesn't apply because, I got it digitally, so we're going to skip that part. But we are going to talk about the cover artwork, and I believe that this cover that you see here is by Alejandro Marabal. And I've got to say, this is a really nice cover. When I judge a cover, I always judge it by the standard, would I pick this up at an actual comic book store or off the shelf at a magazine rack? And this cover, it doesn't really give you a sense of scale. I don't really realize I'm dealing with kaiju until you actually, open up the book and see what's going on. I really would have preferred something from like street level, as these big, huge, ginormous creatures are battling one another in the streets of Tokyo. But unfortunately, that's not what we got. Still, Bob Stone's logo design is still really nice, and it does get the point across about what you can expect in the book, at least as far as character design is concerned. So I'm going to give the cover a 3 out of 5. It's effective, it's modern. Unfortunately, it's too modern in the fact that most comic books nowadays don't sell the book based on the cover, which is still, for me, a major disappointment. Not this cover's a disappointment, no. It's the fact that the industry has moved this direction. That is the disappointment. Thank you, Marvel and DC. This takes us to the interior artwork, which was done by Matthew Weldon. He did the pencils, he did the inks, and I've got to say, I really did like the interior artwork in this book. It actually reminds me quite a bit of the artistic style of Billy Tucci, and it really makes me wonder if Matthew Weldon happens to be a Billy Tucci fan. I mean, Billy Tucci's awesome, so you can think of a lot worse people to emulate than Billy Tucci. I mean, this really gives me the same kind of feeling as far as the artwork is concerned that I got from She Return of the Warrior. So this is really spot on artwork. It has that scratchy ink style that is really popular nowadays, which, call me old-fashioned. I like a nice hard line when it comes to my inking, but it still looks really, really good. It's consistent with the modern style, and I actually really like this artwork. This is spot on. My only real issue with the artwork is the fact that the story takes place in 1966 Japan, and I get no sense of this being 1966 Japan. As a Japanese monster movie fan who's really big into Gamera and Godzilla, I saw a lot of different movies from this era, and the fashions, the designs, the environment just doesn't really scream 1966 Japan. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is how Japan really looked. I'm just conflating what I saw in the films versus what was actually going on. It just seems more like a very American interpretation of what Tokyo would have been like in 1966. The fashions and some of the cultural aspects also don't really seem to fit with, Japanese culture from that era. And I must admit, this is what I'm bringing from, anime. This is what I'm bringing from manga. This is what I'm bringing from Godzilla and Gamera movies. But, it just seems a little bit unauthentic. But really, when that is the worst thing that you can say about the artwork, which is clearly done by somebody here in the West, not somebody from Japan, that's not much of a gripe to have as far as the comic book is concerned. And I'm actually going to give the artwork by Matthew Weldon in this book 4 out of 5 stars. Again, every single page made me think of Billy Tucci. And if you make me think of somebody as awesome as Billy Tucci, I'm definitely going to reward you for it, because Billy Tucci's artwork is fantastic. Billy Tucci's writing is fantastic. Billy Tucci, just as a person, is fantastic. This brings us to the coloring inside of the book, which was done by Nestor Radula Jr. And once again, the coloring, now this is pretty spot on. This again reminds me of also the kind of colors that we saw in She Return of the Warrior. And I liked it. It was good. These were good colors done solidly throughout the entire book. I couldn't find any major glaring errors throughout the book as far as the coloring was concerned. The question becomes then, is this up to par with industry standards, or is this above industry standards? And I'm a little bit torn. There are places in this book where clearly it is definitely above industry standard. There are places in this book where it's at industry standards, but even at industry standards, at the peak of industry standards that you see in most modern comic books. So once again, I find myself in a rather odd position of giving the coloring on this book a 4 out of 5 stars. This is really good coloring in this book. And of course, because this is a Comicsgate book, what would any Comicsgate book be if Eric Weathers did not show up? So yes, once again, we have Eric Weathers back in action doing the lettering in this book. And I gotta say, I think Eric Weathers actually brought it up a notch for this particular outing. The lettering in the book is a little bit more bombastic. There's a little bit more energy to the dialogue balloons. Some of the big moments really are brought to life by Eric Weathers' lettering for those big moments. And I'm actually going to bump this up from a 3 to a 4 because Eric Weathers was really on the ball on this comic book, and that should be rewarded with an extra point. Eric Weathers, 4 stars, thumbs up. Really, really enjoyed it. This brings us, of course, to the writing in the book. And for Psycho 66, the writer was Matthew Fowler. Now, I don't believe I've read anything from Matthew Fowler from any other comic book, but I gotta say, this was a really, really solid outing. I mean, this book, it caught your attention. We get a really good idea of the world that we're entering into. We are effectively pulled into the life of Sayako. Sayako, of course, being the girl who's going to be our protagonist. And hey, Comicsgate, we have a female protagonist other than she. So that's a little bit progressive, our wee little community. And through the entire book, you get a good, positive sense of the story unfolding. And remember, this is just the first chapter in what hopes to be an ongoing series. This isn't some one and done where you skip the entire first act because you don't want to waste your time with proper story structure. No, this is really, really well done. It follows the 3-act structure. We're introduced to all of our characters. We know who our protagonist is pretty much on the very first 5 pages of the book because we essentially have 2. We have the kaiju protagonist and we have our human protagonist, Sayako, in the book. And you're introduced to everybody, you know their world, you get a sense of what's going on in their personal lives, you get a sense of their family relationships, their interpersonal relationships, what's motivating them. This was done really well. You caught my attention, Matthew Fowler. You had me for the entire book. And I really think the wonderful storytelling experience does not just fall into the hands of Matthew Fowler, it also falls into the hands of Jessica Gonzalez. Yes, that's right, Comicsgate. We have another book that has an editor. And let me tell you, if you ever wanted proof that Comicsgate needs editorial, Jessica Gonzalez in this book proved that it's true. Because it's clear to me from page to page to page that somebody had their hand in this to make sure that everything was being done and done right. Done right the first time, because you only get one chance to make a positive first impression. And Jessica Gonzalez made sure that Matthew Fowler, Matthew Weldon, that Nestor Radula Jr., that Eric Weathers, that Alejandro Mirabal, all made, and oh wait, can't forget Bob Stone, all made a really positive first impression with Psycho 66. I mean, Matthew Fowler's story is really good, but I don't think that anything in this book would be as good without Jessica Gonzalez as an editor. And it's clear that Jessica Gonzalez, again, Hispanic, one of my people, nice, is certainly not like the milkshake crew that you got over at Marvel and DC, where they were basically the work girlfriends of the different editors and artists working over in the big industry. No. Jessica Gonzalez is clearly working for a living, not just picking up a paycheck while she's waiting to go do something better. So, Jessica, I'm going to give you a high five because, with your help, Matthew Fowler's story is a 4 out of 5. Matthew Weldon's art is a 4 out of 5. Nestor Radula Jr.'s coloring is a 4 out of 5. Eric Weathers' lettering is a 4 out of 5. The only real deficient aspect of this is Alejandro Marabal's cover, and again, that's just because it just didn't pop, which is why the cover's only getting a 3. But I'm going to go ahead and give this book a bonus point because, as the reviewer, such is my right, I'm going to give this book a bonus point for Jessica Gonzalez's editorial work on this book, making it an amazing, fantastic, wonderful artistic experience from end to end, cover to cover. This book, and I got to admit, this is going to be the first time ever in any of my Comicsgate unboxings, is getting a solid 4 out of 5 stars from stem to stern. This is an amazing book, and I highly recommend that you go out and look for this. I mean, get this. Our main character actually is a musician in the book, and you can't really do that in comic books because what are you going to put down? Poetry? Well, Jessica Gonzalez and the team over at Psycho66 came up with a solution. They actually put a QR code in this book so you could actually listen to the song they had written and produced for this comic book. I mean, wow, you don't see that kind of effort in most comic books. Not in Comicsgate, not in the mainstream. So it is really cool that they actually did that. You can actually go get the song. So yeah, this book, 4 out of 5 stars across the board, an amazing experience. I really encourage all of you to go out there and pick up a copy of Matthew Fowler's Psycho66 because this book is worth every penny that you're going to spend on it. And if you can find a physical copy, not just a digital, but get an actual physical copy of this book, either from the eBay store or from their website or someplace like that, I really encourage you to do that. And I'm actually really looking forward to them actually taking this book and maybe turning into a graphic novel and getting it distributed by Alterna, because this is good enough that I would really want to see it succeed in the mainstream as much as humanly possible and not just be a niche comic book in the Comicsgate world. It should really do more, expand more, and be able to break out of Comicsgate and dominate out there in the mainstream where it could compete against books from Marvel, books from DC that are frankly nowhere near as good as this comic book. Psycho66, 4 out of 5 stars, a inch high first, and I'm really looking forward to more comics by Matthew Fowler and the rest of his team.